And I'm joined now by Drew Dober coming off of a huge win against Nasrat Haqparast. Drew, you're scheduled to fight, I guess it's May the 2nd. What's the situation with that like right now? Is that looking to happen or is that still up in the air?
I mean, to be honest, it's up in the air, but a lot of things are up in the air at this point. Yeah, I was scheduled to fight Diego on May 2nd, but obviously everything was postponed. So as of right now, they're looking to get that May 9th card going. And then from what I heard, it's every weekend after May 9th, they're going to have events for, Americans. So I'm hoping to get on one of those cards in some weekend in May. But as far as opponent and location goes, I have no idea.
So you don't really know when you're going to be fighting, but you kind of have to stay ready, assuming that they're going to reschedule you on a quick turnaround. Dana White came out and said that those who were on postponed cards are going to, I guess, get first dibs.
Right, right. You gotta stay ready. UFC did state that if you're worried about the whole virus situation, or if you don't feel like you're adequately prepared, you don't have to fight. But I'm ready to go. I've been preparing for May 2nd, so May 9th, May 16th. Whenever they want, I want to be able to compete. I want to step in a cage. It doesn't matter where, it doesn't matter who, it doesn't matter when. I'm just so eager to get back to doing what I love doing.
Yeah, and you guys have a great camp out there. Team Elevation is awesome. Some of the biggest coaches in the game. If you look based on sheer size, you got Cody Donovan, you got Elliot Marshall, you got Vinny Lopez. So big bodies in there, but those guys are very, very sharp tacticians. How are you training with them right now at the present, given all the different restrictions in place?
I mean, right now they're opening up like secluded training sessions for fighters with potential fights coming up. So like Justin Gaethje and Neil Magny, who's can easily take a short notice fight as well. So the gyms are opening up, and we're trying to keep the space or the numbers below 10. Kind of following all the recommended requirements. But yeah, we're training every single day, possibly twice a day. With reason, and we're pushing each other. Justin Gaethje and I have been going pretty much 5 rounds, 2 to 3 times a week, every week, all in April.
I was going to say you're probably his top training partner based on size, but I'm sure that Neil Magny and his range is coming in pretty handy for him as well.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And we had a bunch of teammates, not in the UFC, that are quality. Giving us different looks, different skill levels, all sorts of things. Because at this point, you don't know who you're fighting, so you got to prepare for everyone.
Yeah, things can just change on a dime. So you and your team are obviously very comfortable with the situation. Justin Gaethje doesn't typically like taking short notice fights. I spoke to him last year in July, and he was offered that Ferguson fight that Cowboy ended up getting on like 4 weeks' notice. Wasn't comfortable taking it. Circumstances are a bit different this time with an interim title, but what was his mentality like when he was, I guess, given this opportunity?
Well, I'm grateful in the fact that so Gaethje was coming in and helping me prepare for my May 2nd bout. And so he was coming in, and we were training hard, and we're getting after it. So when he did get the short notice offer, he was already in the gym preparing. So the attention just went from me to then also sharing the spotlight with Gaethje. So yeah, he's ready to go.
I imagine that Fajeha is your most likely opponent, given that it seems like he's ready. A lot of the guys at Fortis are still training in a similar way that you guys are. So with Diego, he's on a roll. You're on a roll. This is a very, very difficult matchup given how good that guy is. But I mean, you're no slouch yourself. How have you been preparing for him in specific?
I mean, noticing his strengths, his fight with Anthony Pettis, jiu-jitsu's fantastic, his pressure, and he's very talented in like the chaos, like the scrambles and whatnot. And then so I'm just acknowledging what he's strong at, so that way I can just prepare for 15 minutes of making him uncomfortable, putting him in the positions and the situations that he doesn't like and keeping him there. I feel Dustin Poirier and Beneil showed kind of like the game plan of how to beat him, and y'all try to repeat that process.
I think that the thing about Diego that I like is that he didn't need to accept this fight. I mean, he just fought Pettis, who's a big name, and a lot of these guys that have rankings beside their names or getting into that situation are often hesitant to take a fight unless it's against like a highly ranked individual. So kudos to him on that, and kudos to you. I mean, I think that you're in a situation where you should be facing ranked fighters.
Oh no, I agree. Like I was actually pretty surprised that he accepted that fight, and so it just shows his his mentality and his gamer attitude and his willingness to fight anyone. So I really like that about Diego. I mean, he's a true martial artist and a talented competitor, and I can't wait.
After you beat Hack Press, you said something about that you had sensed some anxiety in him. How do you get that feeling when you're with an opponent?
I've been practicing a lot for the last couple of years of being in the moment and, never letting my mind, stray too far away from what's happening right here, right now. And what that has helped me do is kind of just notice some small things in the moment, whether it's harsh breathing or eye contact or body language. So that way I can, in the fight and even surrounding the fight, I can kind of get a vibe or like a mood on like what's going on. And, just fight week and even leading up to the actual fight, Hackbrass is an amazing, talented fighter and a really great guy. But I did notice a sense of urgency, and that sense of urgency, to me is like, yeah, you got to take your time in the sport. You can't really just try to rush things.
So are things kind of moving for you in slow motion when you're in there at this state?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, with practice, it hasn't always been like this, but with practicing and being in the moment and being aware of just where you're at right now, yeah, you just become very aware of what's going on, and things do move in slow motion. Yes.
That's difficult to do though, because to have the awareness to notice a little nuance with him, like something as little as a little characteristic, while you're trying to focus also on beating the guy. I mean, that takes a lot of mental energy. So that's a very big compliment to you, obviously, that you're able to do that. But it just took years of training for you to be able to notice these little things.
Right, right. I feel like people make the mistake in trying to practice it when it's necessary. Where I found that you just got to practice every single day, which is incredibly hard. Your mind always wanders. But in my training situations, when I'm uncomfortable, even when I'm comfortable, or sitting at home, just trying to be in that moment, not think about yesterday or try to think too far ahead of tomorrow and future days, especially in this situation with the quarantine and not knowing what's going on. You got to treat every day, just accordingly. So on Monday, I got these training practices. I have these things to do, and until further notice, this is the only thing I can focus on Monday. And so it kind of helps, whether you're at home, at the gym, fight week, and then eventually in the fight, just being aware of your current situation and not like letting it wander. You got to practice it 24/7.
Obviously, yourself and Justin Gaethje are confident that he's going to be able to beat Ferguson, but obviously there's you have to know that there's a good shot that he could lose that fight as well. But knowing that fight is April 18th versus May the 9th, how much more of a chance does it give Gaethje to win this fight? Like, how much will that extra practice help him, given that Ferguson's had this long, full camp?
I think it helps Justin Gaethje prepare for a 5-rounder because he was ready for a 3-rounder for sure, for April 18th. But also gives Tony Ferguson time to prepare as well. He was getting ready to fight Khabib, which is a strong wrestler, and Gaethje's a heavy puncher. So a short notice fight actually was going to work in Justin's benefit. So now, since they have a little bit more time to prepare for each other, I think it makes the fight a little bit more interesting, I believe.
Will you be making weight on May the 1st since you were supposed to fight on May the 2nd?
Oh no. I'm not a huge fan of touching 155, just randomly. And I think that's kind of the hardest part with things going on, right? Is I don't know what weekend I'm fighting, and peak performance is not sustainable indefinitely. So it's like I'm trying to determine how many calories to eat every single day, whether to push, when to recover, and I'm trying to gather as much information as possible so that way when the time comes I do step in the cage, I'm at my peak performance. And yeah, it's getting pretty difficult.
Yeah, that was mostly a reference to what Tony Ferguson did on Friday, cutting weight for no reason.
I know. I'm watching it going, why would you do that? But Tony Ferguson, I mean, he's doing backflips off like yoga balls and stuff like that. So he doesn't do things that most people find intelligent, but it works for him. So let him do it.
Yeah, I saw a lot of people saying you got to understand the fighter's mentality when you see someone do that. I go, no, it's not the fighter's mentality. It's just Tony Ferguson's mentality.
Yeah, exactly. He's elbowing steel poles. So making 155 is within reach of his mentality.
So when you're going 25 minutes with Gaethje, how much does that help your cardio, having to deal with basically constant pressure for 25 minutes day in and day out?
I wouldn't say cardio is tested. I think just mental fortitude and body conditioning is tested. He's a great training partner, so we don't intentionally hurt each other. But yeah, it gets super super tough. So 25 minutes in a cage with Gaethje, like your body hurts. So it's just he's testing that willingness to move forward. He's putting that pressure on. He's hurting you, and either you take a knee or quit, or you keep going.
I recently did a show with Dan Tom, who works at MMA Junkie, and we did a podcast where we talked about the 5 worst stoppages in MMA history. What do you think my number 1 was?
Oh God, are you talking about the Brazilian one that I had?
That would be it. Number 1 on my list of all-time worst stoppages. Do you ever go back and watch that and wonder what that referee was? I mean, like, not only was the choke not in, you were in half. I think he was in half guard, pretty much, where it's really difficult to get that kind of a tap. You gave the thumbs up, if I'm not mistaken, and your head had just slipped out. Like, do you ever go back and watch that and think, what was this guy thinking?
I mean, I feel like I know what he's thinking. Because I feel like there was a couple. He was reffing multiple fights that night, and there was a fight before ours where the guy went to sleep, in a guillotine choke. So I felt like going into my fight, the ref was just oversensitive to not allowing another fighter to go to sleep. But I mean, even then, like, it doesn't justify his poor decision. But it is what it is. It's in the past now, so I can't really think too much about it. It's still fun to watch because it's an interesting scenario. But yeah, I don't think about what the referee was thinking.
I mean, it's not a loss. It was overturned. So, I mean, I don't think you can think too badly on it. Of course, that is a win that was robbed from you, because had that fight continued to go, who knows what would have happened. But there's always the potential that you would have won that fight.
Agreed. When a win in the win column is taken away from you, it's very upsetting.
God, I just go back and watch it, and I look at the positioning, and I just think to myself, like, I just don't know how you can make that kind of mistake, because Eduardo Hurdy's not some boxing guy. Like, he's a high-level jiu-jitsu practitioner.
Oh, I know. Yeah, I think the disheartening thing is, like, it wasn't just like that 10 minutes taken away from me. It's the 8 weeks and the weight cut, and it's all that preparation, and and just not being able to see it fully was a huge disappointment.
Well, it's hard as well with a lot of these fights that are being postponed, especially with the ones in London, where you see, like, Ashley Evans Smith travels to London, and I feel so. I know that postponing the event's probably the right thing to do from, like, a societal standpoint, but I feel so bad for the amount of work that nobody sees. The work that goes into these kind of fights, the dieting, the day in and day out training, the taking lumps in the gym, getting injured probably. Most fighters go into fights with injuries. It's difficult to know that all of that has happened, and to, obviously this global pandemic has derailed a lot of people's lives, but to know the amount of work that goes into a camp, which I can't even really fathom because I've never done it, but to know that all of that is kind of dies on the vine is very difficult.
It's incredibly difficult. But I was actually just talking to some people today just about, I feel like fighters should be prepared for all this stuff. At no point in my career has the fight game been certain. Like, opponents, fight days, money, like training sessions, like nothing was ever certain. Like, fights are always postponed or canceled. Opponents always change. There's injuries. And so the fight game is a very uncertain sport. So I feel like fighters should be prepared for the uncertainty of what's going on today, where it's like UFC, we're kind of spoiled. We have set time, set opponents, and UFC works really hard at getting us jobs and putting us in the cage. But before the UFC, like local events, I mean, nothing was ever certain.
Yeah, it's so much easier said than done, too, because a fighter is so focused on that one opponent, on the one goal of making weight. Like, it's difficult to think about these scenarios because it can throw you off. How would you recommend a fighter think about that, especially during fight week, knowing that there's still a degree of uncertainty, even though you see your opponent at the hotel, you never know what's going to happen?
You just got to focus on what you can control. And, in my career, my training, my talent, and my performance is the only things I can control, and my attitude. So when it comes to people asking me about individual fights, I'm like, I'm not preparing for an individual person. I am constantly focusing on myself. So that way, if my opponent is looking at my past fight, I've already evolved since then. I'm constantly focusing on what I can do to prepare for myself, and I'm preparing not for just Diego, but I'm also preparing for like Cerrone, Poirier, and then potentially Khabib. So my training is always reflecting fights that may happen like further in the future. So I wouldn't say I'm too focused on any set date or set opponent. I'm constantly just trying to work on myself and get better as every day goes along.
Well, you talk about your attitude, and you've got a great one, sir. Congratulations on a great career so far, and we
Thank you.
look forward to more success from you.
I appreciate it, man.